right, welcome listeners to the Banquet Hall podcast. I am blessed and excited to be joined by the one, the only Andre 1K. Andre, how you doing today, my brother?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. We're lucky to be in your presence. Today's topic, we're talking about why the Lakers are the best franchise in sports, and Andre has a
You sent to run a show there with nothing stop it. To be clear, I didn't see. I mean,
Did you look at the updated agenda though? The one that saved like updated new agenda.
the new. I'm only at updated new, so I think.
Oh,
yeah.
See, that's the thing when you save files. Like I saved it as an updated new, so that you knew which one we was talking about. I should have deleted the old one. So we'll just go off the original runner show since that's the one you was looking at it, and we'll get you to talk about the Lakers at another time.
Yeah.
But listeners, if this is your first time checking out the Banquet Hall, make sure you follow the podcast at Banquet Hall Pod and text a friend right now for them to tune in so they can hear more about Andre's story. But Andre, this first question that I start the podcast with, I don't even know if you know this or if I said this to you directly, but I feel like you inspired the first question of this podcast and just this like the podcast in general, because with the podcast, I always start asking people where they're from. And the reason why I feel like I thought a lot about you with this question is because having gone to college with you, and we'll get into that in a bit, one of the things that I noticed is whenever anybody asks you, like, where are you from or where's home for you, there's always a pause and a like, you analyze the situation a bit to see like, okay, how much am I about to share with this person? How much time we got? Do you really care? Because home is such a involved thing for you. So I was like, what would it be like if you were to have a podcast episode where you could talk as long or as in depth as you want about whatever home looks like for you? So I've had a lot of fun just hearing people's stories about where home is for them. And I'm excited for the listeners to finally hear you answer the question, where are you from and what does home mean to you?
Wow, that's a great starter. So I lived in. So I'm what 28 now. So between the time I started school, so kindergarten to high school, I switched schools something like 12 or 13 times. And then I lived in started in North Carolina, Shelby, that's where I'm from. That's where I like grew up at. But then I lived in Virginia, lived in Florida, lived in Texas, and lived in California. So like that was like basically all of my formative time. I would always go back to North Carolina, so I would say like if it's a physical place, that would be it. But as far as home, I feel like I found that home is more so within me and the people. So like um and I feel like the more that I leaned into that, it helped me be more, I would say, in the present and not like kind of in this future mindset of like, okay, somebody's gonna ask me like where am I from, and I'm gonna have to like, because you would see it like my eyes would kind of glaze over because I'm just like, this is some random person that I know this whole conversation is only gonna be 30 seconds. So I'm just like, I will give a quick like, I went to high school in California because I'm starting the story at where it's relevant. So I went to high school in California, and I got into UCSD. All right. So, and then if it's like, oh, like you don't sound like you from here. Now I gotta be like, oh, well, I'm from North Carolina, moved around a little bit, and then I ended up here. Like sometimes I'll just speed run. I'll just speed run because um I think one of the things about me is like I take seriously those things. Maybe it's because I'm from a smaller town, I'm from like a smaller place, but like when somebody asks you where you from, we're fully prepared to be sitting on this porch for the next like until so like you feel free to have at it. There is nothing else to do. Like I just there's nothing else to do. So I do miss that like about home, and I think it's more challenging to configure when you're in a very like busy place.
Mm-hmm.
Um because for perspective, I always tell people this, but Shelby is like smaller than the campus of UCSB in terms of population. So like this is a lot for your boy.
I don't even
it's a
sound real.
it's a lot for your boy. Like just you know coming from that and then being plopped here, like just dropped here. Like I didn't know it was gonna be like you know what I'm saying. I went to high school in the IE, so like in like Mobile and stuff like that. Like I was around there. I went to Mobile High School, and that shaped me too. Like I feel like
Mm-hmm.
um I don't know anybody that's went to that high school. Double salute. I feel like we all just know. I don't know, but just coming from there and then realizing I'm at like at least for how they measure schools, like I guess not a good school in terms of the tiers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think what it was like it was good people. So I feel like that was something that just shaped me. So middle school I lived in Texas. And I think that was kind of the blend of both like California and like North Carolina because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot going on, but not a lot going on at the same time. Like, and I miss it. I don't miss the weather at all though. They was over here talking about it was 110 degrees and 111 degrees. Um, listen,
Nah, I'm cool off of that.
I'm gonna be 100 with you. I used to have to wake up Saturday mornings. I'm talking six, brother. I'm talking six on a Saturday, like from a week. Because I mean, if you wait too long, you might pass out. Like people legit pass out cutting grass. Like it's a
That's
it's a whole thing.
that's wild.
Like and but I think outside of that, like I feel like just the I feel like the community element of being in like Texas, like just the whole city coming to the game, to the high school regular
Mm,
football game. They stadiums is bigger than UCSB. So like just the I guess the word is minutia, but the whole vibe of, like, it's kind of like that in North Carolina too. Like the whole everything shut down because everybody at the game. So you know what the thing to
mm.
do tonight is? Either
Go
go
to
to
the
the
game.
game or go to the game. Like there's like what's after the game. You know, those everything's surrounded around something. And I think just being in California, it's hard to find those like things where the whole like multi-generational things that people do because I don't experience that a lot. Like every age group is gonna all do this. Like, nah, it's like it ain't really like that all the time. And I know that it's different once you have like family out here, of course, but like my entire family's in North Carolina basically. So there's not as much like off chance uncle so and
Yeah.
so's like, you know, blase blah is like all of that's happening back there. So I think but overall, I think home is like something that I had to understand is within me. Like, and I make home wherever I'm at. Like, if I just got a book bag and a pair of shoes, how I make home wherever I'm at. And I think that's something that I learned over time just to um, like focus on what those parts are that we can be a part of and not so much on like I guess this idealized view of what everybody got or everybody else doing. Because a lot of that stuff's like made up anyway too. So
Got that
just
right.
people, focusing more on the people.
Focusing more on the people. And I just want to give the listeners kind of a glimpse into what you mean when you say that, like Shelby's smaller than population of UCSD. Just off a quick Google search for 2021, the population of Shelby, North Carolina was 21,947 people. UCSD, like population of undergrads alone is over 30,000 students. That's not to mention the tens of thousands of staff on campus and graduate students. There's multiple
Just
hospitals on
people.
campus, people in general, people at the beach. There's just so many people in your natural vicinity. And so, like, going from somewhere where there's only 20,000 plus people, then you got to live in the biggest, like, or the second biggest state of Texas, and like having like those communal things, or even though this is big ass place, like everybody's still coming together to do this centralized activity. And yeah, I never really heard you talk about like that, like the act of like the high school football games and that being like a town shutting down to come to this, because you really don't see that in a state like California with these big cities where there's just always something else you could do if you're not interested. And the closest kind of remote landing point I could think of is still high school football games growing up in the city of LA. But like you said, it's if you have family or you went to school in these areas, because I feel like I just talked about this on the podcast with Joy, actually, when Joy was on the podcast. We are talking about how everybody in the like Catholic school circle would go to the Seraph high school football games on Friday. But at the same time, it's like if you ain't feel like doing that, there's plenty of other shit you could do in LA.
Yeah, like somebody could just be like, "Hey, the Lakers play tonight down the street. You want to go to that? You still want to go play Mario Kart at your homie crib?" Like, no, like so. I think that's what I appreciate that though. Like I always like going to LA. I feel like LA is the closest thing to Shelby as California, like LA and kind of like the IE and stuff like that. It's the closest thing because when you're not like downtown, I would say when you're
Yeah.
like in a world, it's like it feels the closest thing to. It's just like beautiful, like just like just like I'm over here looking like, dang, that movie actually was shot right there. Like that's why that looks like that. Wow, I actually know where I'm at right now. Wow, this is actually beautiful of what's going on, and I always appreciate like those experiences because it helps connect me more to what brings us together. Like, and I've met all people of all these different places, all these different cultures, and usually it's got something to do with some food, something to do with
Mm-hmm.
like the activity, or we just come to support. Like at least on the high school football thing, teachers will be at the game just because one of their students is starting linebacker for the first time, and they like, oh, you gotta come to my game because I'm starting tonight or something. And now they brought the A kid. Like it's just this whole thing where you start to build connections, and I think it can be done. It's just once it's intentional, it's just about like choosing that, but I think I think that's the main thing.
I totally feel you on that. So when it comes to transitioning all the way across the country, you grew up in Shelby, got to live in Texas, Florida, lived in California. So you've had a lot of experience in different places, a lot of experiences building community, meeting people. And so I want to transition to talk about how we first crossed paths. So one of the reasons why I really wanted to start with asking where you're from, like, of course, I ask everybody that question, but really emphasizing that point of how much you say about where you're from in different situations. Because I do think that as you progress through your time at UCSD, in certain spaces, you might say more or less to where you're from. But I will never forget our very first in-person interaction, but I need to kind of walk us up to the in-person fact. So some of y'all recognize Andre from the Natural Nonsense podcast. So forgive me if you're hearing this story for the second time on a podcast. But for the listeners who haven't heard us tell this story before, I came into UCSD as a bright-eyed young 17-year-old Black man from Los Angeles, California, who
Mm.
really didn't have a lot of understanding of what I was getting into at UCSD. I just knew that I really wanted to play 2K.
That was, I mean, that was, I was the same. I was coming in, thinking, wow, hundreds of people that's my age. What do hundreds of people my age do? We
Play
all play 2K. That's all we all do. That's all I know. That's all my friends do is
Yeah,
just
that's just what makes sense. And not only are there thousands of people here, we have our own class of 2017 Facebook group. So I can easily, step outside of my comfort zone and just let's make friends. Let's do the college thing. So I logged my black ass onto Facebook and posted in the UC San Diego class of 2017 Facebook page, who want they ass kicked in NBA 2K? And it was crickets for a while. But then your roommate commented, or one of your suite mates commented, I was like, "Oh, my roommate might be interested." And you was like, "Oh yeah, I'm down to play." I was like, "Bet." And you was black, and I didn't know that was a big deal at that point. I'm not even gonna lie. I was like, "Hey,
honestly did. Because when we first linked, it just felt like this nigga played 2K. That was, I
that
mean,
was it."
like we cool now, but I'm just saying at the time, like I've always just randomly played random
Yeah,
niggas. But we played 2K that one time. So
yeah,
for me, it was not it wasn't as like I don't know when they say like the immaculate reception or something like
yeah. It was
wasn't
just, it
like
was
that.
real regular. I didn't know that I wasn't gonna find another black person for 2 months after that moment. I just knew that this person wanted to play 2K. And so even our first interaction was so simple. It was like, "Oh, what's up? I'm Andre. I'm Kyler. Where you from? LA. Where you from? Shelby." In my head, I was like, "Where? I don't care. We just about to go play 2K at the door."
And then like I just was sitting there, we was playing the game, right? And I was noticing similarities in your dorm and my dorm. And the similarities were just, huh, we're just playing 2K, like just us two. Nobody got Rise, nobody got Next, nobody's like on the sticks as I walk in. There's no music playing. There's there's just like, bro, controller. I think I might have brought my controller, and yeah, that that was it. Usually, this is a whole affair. There's a minimum of 6 people.
At least.
Just and then it's a bigger room. Like so, you naturally you thinking like, oh, so we could be in here really kicking it, like for real. Nah,
Nah, it was just us. Um, we can or cannot go into the details of said game. I will leave that up
nah.
to
We can
you.
go into the details. I lost, and this started a long trend of just like, cause I'm never like I don't like losing. I already know that. But when I play video games specifically, I just be like, yo, like I lost. Ah, all right. Man, it was some wild stuff happening in these games, man. And hey, I'll take my L's, but I was like, yo, I think one time Chris Paul double dribble. I was like, they can double dribble on the game. Like, I was like, I didn't even know they called double dribble. Like,
But
the
why is
more
that even programmed into? Why would Chris Paul double dribble?
Chris
That was,
Paul,
I think that was the biggest issue because it was like the game was like, yeah, everything's going right, but what if Chris Paul just double dribbled right now?
let's use that 1 in a billion code we wrote in this game, and let's use it on Andre right now in the fourth quarter. Like, I don't know, it'll just be stuff like that, and but hey, it is what it is. My little brother, he nice on the sticks. It's bad how it is now. I think I've gotten to that point to where I might need to put my sticks in the rafters, man, because whoa, smoking all of us though. Like, like he was hitting threes with Sengun. It's like, whoa,
Oh, he nice with the sticks, man.
man.
But here we are, a game of 2K almost 10 years ago. And here we are on a podcast together once again. But I think that it's one of my favorite stories to tell just because it's like you never know what like minor interactions will blossom into because I had no idea if I was ever going to see you, especially after I was like, oh, damn, I won too. I was like, he ain't
Yeah,
ever coming
well,
back here.
Hey, and then I left. I was like, it wasn't even like no, like, man, like I'm gonna get her next time. I was just like, hey, all right, I'll holler at you, dog.
Yeah.
That was it, man. I'll holler at you, man. I didn't even think. I was like, I guess because there was no one to play next. So then that's weird. I don't know if you for the folks that don't play 2K, it's kind of strange to keep playing somebody back to back to back to back to back to back. It's just you don't. It just start to get kind of like, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's totally. But I want to kind of fast forward a bit, not necessarily to any specific point in time at UCSD, but for the listeners, obviously through the story, you can tell Andre's another one of the UCSD mafia. But I think that it's just so hard to condense all of our UC San Diego experiences into a podcast segment. But the thing that kind of came to mind as I was preparing for this episode was, and give me a little runway to kind of set this up, but I think when you come into a college environment, in such a different environment and in this bubble of UCSD, you're learning and unlearning just so much. You're learning like grand topics in your major. Then you're learning about blackness. Then you're learning about misogyny and homophobia and transphobia. You're learning about all these isms, classisms, ableism. It's a lot of just general information. And I think that what was like essential to my UC San Diego experience was the fact that I knew that I had someone else who also was understanding how much we're learning and unlearning and how important it was for us to have like a safe space in each other and the dorm that we lived in, being on like different boards and stuff together, to just be able to talk about like, yo, what happened today? Because I think, especially as it pertains to our positionality and thinking about intersectionality as Black men, there's a lot we're learning about Blackness, and within Blackness, a lot of we're learning about how Black women and Black queer and trans people have been very much impacted by like intersections of all these isms and whatnot. So there was times where like we can't just take up that space in these meetings and spaces to talk about like, oh, whatever my experiences as a Black man. We knew that there was a time where we could have that, and I think that where our friendship really blossomed was a lot of those times after a BSU board meeting or just after an event where we just back at the dorm and we're just unpacking that day or unpacking what's going on for the last couple of weeks. So the question I have to kind of jump us off into the conversation is, what was the importance of like having healthy Black male friendships at UCSD for you?
I feel like it made it to where there was a growth process happening and not just like because healthy to me meant like growth. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just like, man, I'm just gonna stay the same through this whole rest of this time. But it was like, yo, like people putting me on to jobs, people putting me on to opportunities, putting me on to McNair, put me on to like a lot of different things. And like I think it's also understanding how diverse a group, like a room full of us as Black men, like when we had like the Black Men's Collective, that was
Mm-hmm.
something that us and Derek, we kind of made happen and start a little bit. So um in those spaces, it was some of the first times where I felt like you a genuine effort was made by somebody to either A, really dive into a topic, or B, listen. Because I think sometimes, like, um, for myself, like, sometimes I would go in there and I wouldn't even really say too much because people already saying what like what's being said and just being able to listen. Um, but I think all of those experiences help to shape the breadth that you can express and not just like, oh, here's the cookie cutter way to express. Here's the cookie cutter way to be accepted. Because in those rooms, we have people that was professors all the way to like I'm in my first year, all the way to I'm a grad student trying to start getting my like so. we're getting a breath. It's kind of like that multi-generational thing I was telling you about. Like, I think there's more of that needed than can be explained, just because I was put onto a lot of stuff just because it was some great, like, elders of the space that was like popping in and was just like, yo, like, that's what we experienced when we already done went through y'all age twice. And so they over here like really being wise, but they're also listening to where we at. And it feels like an actual fusion of progression. Um, and I think that's something that I always left any conversation with, even if I disagree, especially when I disagree. Because when I disagree, it forced me to sharpen my steel a little more, go like get back in the book or get back in the, get back into the literature. Like, um, and so that's what I would say.
No, I think that's wonderfully stated. And just going along with like literature and learning and being in these spaces, of course, I feel like whenever it comes to talking about UCSD, sometimes I get lost. Like, what did you actually come to college for? Like, at the end of the day, like we're doing all this stuff. You also had class like throughout the week and whatnot. And so at UC San Diego, you were a poli sci major. So what led you to wanting to pursue poli sci? And you could talk about at UCSD in general. You could talk about what type of influences. What led to you coming into political science?
Yeah, so I got in for structural engineering and then I switched. So people always like, they're like, wow, that's such a like, you know, drastic difference. And I'm like, yeah. But I think it wasn't just because I felt like it. Like I went to the club, the little
Mm-hmm.
engineering club. I went to conferences. I was in the classes. I was in the labs doing experiments. Like I immersed myself fully into the experience. I went to my professor's office hours. I went to the grad student office hours. I went to the study groups. I I went 10 toes and I left with not a care of any of it. I did not care. And I didn't expect that. Like I love like I think it's one of those things where you find out like something's like a hobby or something that's like you kind of are interested in, but as far as your lens, it's I don't think I was at a level where I was like, yeah, I wanna like pursue this and do this.
Mm-hmm.
Because they showed us hands-on stuff. Like it wasn't like I would like the engineering program is dope. Like I mean it was one of the best in the world for sure. But when they was doing PowerPoints and presentations, look at this bridge basement. Yeah, we poured this concrete out. We measured out the strength and tensile strength of the steel in between, and then yeah, we used this special kind of steel. But yeah, this is this basement we made, and it's like whoa. Like on one end, like it's amazing that it takes this much effort and mind power to create all these things we see all over the place. On the other end, I was like, whoa, I'm just not going, I'm just not going to be able to do that. Like, I feel like had I been maybe in a environment that was like, I feel like there's always multi universes. Like they bring it up now. I think it's like trendy because there's all these like multiverse and
Mm-hmm.
like oh, there's all these different things. But I honestly think there is a universe where maybe I'm at like a HBCU or something in the engineering program, and I'm like, I have a hands-on professor, and I'm like they really like the social justice aspect to it is just ingrained inherently in what I'm in and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I wasn't gonna finish school if it was gonna be about what it was for other people. Cause that's all. Oh, you get an engineering job, you get some good money. And I found out how much people was making just in anything, and I was like, oh well. I mean, yeah, but it might not be like an instantaneous thing. Where as soon as I graduate, I'm just like at this level. But I think I was comfortable with the fact that I was gonna leave with a lens and a mindset shift that I haven't experienced in my family. Like I've always had people that like to work and had great jobs and great work ethic. And I think the reason that I picked poli sci was more so because there wasn't a Black Studies program. Like I
Mm-hmm.
minored in African American Studies, but if there would have been a major when I was a student, I would have been that was what I would have majored in because um I don't know, dude. I guess the best way I can describe it is like it it's fantastic to be specialized and want to kind of like do those specific things. But I think at the time I was like, I need to know about myself and my folks on a holistic sense before I try to like step out and just go like go out into the world and do that. And I think some big influences to that was um being involved with BSU and like ABC and stuff like that, and just like feeling how much learning about one another and teaching one another, learning about Black people, that's gonna fuel me forever. So I'm content with like teaching and learning about Blackness and Black people, you know, until so I knew it was gonna take passion like that to finish because I feel like um it was just hard to go through class and do all that stuff. It was just hard, you know what I'm saying? But I think um that's got me to a point where I'm like, yo, like for as long as I live, if I'm on this path and I'm gonna be learning about Black people and Black stuff, like I'm gonna be satisfied and happy with myself. And
Mm-hmm.
that's more of what I took away and the most valuable thing I took away because now that I'm older, I'm so happy I did that because then I would have just been in a situation like trying to figure out or pivot career, pivot life, do all of this stuff. Um, because I wasn't staying true to what I knew at that time. Like, cause
Mm-hmm.
at the time I already knew what time it was. I was like, this is cool though. Like, if you never been in those labs, it's cool. Like, we made a whole bridge. Like, we had like this machine that would test the strength of the bridge. And
Mm-hmm.
we made it out of like popsicle sticks and stuff, but they had a whole machine to really test the pressure and force of the different parts of the bridge and the weak spots. And we got to go back and improve it and stuff. Like it was real cool. Like I'm not like I'll be telling people all the time, like cause it's this stigma of like, oh, we all gotta be in STEM.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, man, some people like they do the STEM and it just for them all the ingredients together didn't come together. And they also wanted I would have had to do a fifth year, all type of stuff. So I was
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah, that's a lot of factors there.
yeah. So I think had I been in an environment where it was more inclusive of like, hey, we all Black engineers trying to get up out. And I was involved with NSB too. I think what was hard, well, in my experience at least, was like everybody, like there wasn't a consensus of people in your engineering track. So like um it wasn't like there was 5 or 6 structural engineers that was in Nesby all with me in the same year. It was like, oh, that person's mechanical, that person's nano, that person, and it like that's very good. But I think I might have needed like way more of an academic enclosure into it that I don't think existed um at the time. So
Yeah, I love that retelling of your academic journey because I think you mentioned a few things in there that I think is important for people to hear. But the one thing I want to specifically highlight as kind of an eventual segue too, but um, is just you talking more in depth about why learning about like Black people is important. Because I know that when you are at the Thanksgiving table or dinner of family and it's like, oh yeah, like I'm taking African American studies classes. It's like, oh, what job is that going to get you or where the money at in that. And I think that through like just the conversations at UCSD and talking to people like Dr. Childs and Dr. Maya Hines, like getting to know like the ways that we can incorporate African American studies into any career field, I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. So I guess a jump off point for that is like when you look back at some of your African American studies classes and just your desire to pursue more of that knowledge, what would you say is one of the more important things or the most important thing that you gain from just being able to be exposed to your history and culture in that way?
I would say it connected me to our universal truth of my experiences in these different places with Black people. Because in Florida, I was around Black Dominican people, Black Haitian people, uh, Black people from like Belize, Black people from Jamaica, Black people like so. Then in North Carolina, it's more so like I don't know what I still don't know what they call. I guess I hope they have a word for it, but just like I guess I guess what do they say, like descendants of slavery? I guess I don't know.
Mm,
I guess that's what the word is, but and then in California, it's been like a lot more uh like people that's from like West Africa, East Africa, South Africa. So then I'm able to put together all these experiences, and then it's like when I have a thought, like I'm not just like a what do you call like equity diversity officer or like
mm,
expert or something. I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm like. I mean, I got a certificate. Like I got my paperwork now, but I wouldn't say that that's my practitioner. It would be
mm,
more so like I'm able to answer a question. If we have a group of Black students and we want to do this or this, or Black people in general, and we want to do this event or we want to do this program, um, what are some things to consider? Who might need to be uplifted in that space? Like I can really look at some stuff and give like a way to go about it. You know what I'm
mm,
saying? I think a lot of times people think there's an answer, but it might not appear yet. You might need to go talk to some people, and that often isn't met well with like because they think, oh, I'm talking to the Black person, so the Black person knows what the Black people want. But nah, I mean, I'm like, you hearing from a Black
right.
person, and the more that people realize we're not a monolith, but we do share similar qualities. That's what that's why I believe in Pan-Africanism and just like bringing together all of us under a united front, because we do have that similar experience of being Black in this world, and um material consequences too. Like I think that's more of what I be seeing is like,
Mm,
wow, the police didn't really care that he liked Yu-Gi-Oh, or he, was a part of the Nigerian like, student council or something. Like there's so many layers to that they shave off when they just
mm,
throw us in cages and throw us in like lynch mob settings. They take away all that. Now use some name, and now they're measuring up like, oh, they played the flute too, and now all the flute players is playing the flute and honoring. And I think all of that's cool. I just feel like it gets to be taken away. Like all of those layers only come back after somebody already gone, and it's like that always strikes me as like just weird. So
mm,
I'll be wanting to do that while people here, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we show that diversity while people is here in a joyous moment, in a positive moment, in a progressive moment? And I feel like a lot of that takes like, folks coming together and stuff, but I don't think I'm like, I got all the answers or nothing, but what I do know from my experience matching up to what I've read and what I've researched and studied, um, like I've done a research project on the invisibility of rural Black America. So
mm.
um, what that basically looks at is when we look at media, we look at culture, we look at movies. I ask people all the time, what movie have you seen based in the South that's depicting Black people in present day?
Mm.
And the movie they name, ATL.
That's what came to mind first for me.
And then you might say Hustle and Flow. The thing that ATL and Hustle and Flow miss about the rural experience is like you're not able to see the like space in between. Like, because everything kind of feel like on top of each other a little bit. But even in stuff like that, like there's not a lot of literature on it. When I was doing our project, it was actually kind of hard to do a little bit because there wasn't a lot of literature on it, which I know eventually, like when I go to grad school and stuff, like that will be, I guess, technically a good thing. Like for technical sakes, because like, oh, that means there's something to bring to the literature or something. Um, and I'm sure probably now there's more, but at the time, especially, there wasn't like a whole lot on it. So I had to use different sources. So I used the interview that my grandma did of my great grandpa, and um, basically she was interviewing him about his time growing up. And I have the tape and stuff. And then what was wild is while I was doing the research for it, um there was a like baby noise in the back, like yelling or something. And then my grandma says, Andre, be quiet. And so I'm listening to it on the tape and I'm like, yo, this is like this
It's like
is
time travel.
like some time travel type stuff. But I think like that gave verified facts. Like he wasn't like doing no, like he was giving verified facts like about like the GI Bill, and I was able to go through his timeline and look at the discrimination. Like
Mm.
I was able to line up discrimination with the points that he was speaking to and how we got to where we were today. And then it's just like, wow, this is such a untapped part of the experience because, I think a lot of times, even going back to the Great Migration, because what people don't know is the reverse migration has been happening since the 70s.
Hmm.
So people have been going back to the South in droves, but it hasn't had the same kind of like attention because now people are being pushed out of the urban centers because of cost, whereas before they was being forced in because of cost. So now they being forced out of these larger centers into more rural spaces all over the country. But what happens is when you push people out into those spaces, those resources that are in that community center, they're not getting out there.
Right.
So that's something that I want to like, spend more time with, like maybe, grad school and stuff, but just spend more time with like trying to merge this new world of Zoom, this new world of like technology, like all of these different things, and merge that with that rural experience so that people don't have to feel that they have to go be somewhere to get access to stuff to help progress
Hmm.
forward.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like as we progress through this capitalist Zoom, quote unquote, post pandemic society, things are moving so fast and so iteratively that sometimes or not even sometimes, a lot of times, we lose track of the people who are on the margins or who don't have access to the technology or who just aren't caught up with what's going on. Like we just live in this like production zone.
Yeah, and that's by design because, you know, there's not the thing that I learned the most out of my political science classes is that corruption and power and money that's a part of the fabric of the human experience. So yes, there's different political systems you can throw in and say, oh, this one's better, this one's better, and stuff like that. There's clear the ones that are um, that have like inherent truths to human rights, and there's ones that aren't. Like if we do the like for they did a poll and they were basically saying having the votes for who voted for food being a human right, and one of the only countries to vote no, United States.
The greatest one.
Yeah. And then we know how much food that restaurants throw away. So then when you start putting together these thoughts, it's like, huh, like So I think that's one of the things that I appreciated about that lens. And also, I was a student while the whole Trump era was my time as a political science student, and that that was an experience in itself because I was in the classes with professionals who thought I was like, you know, wow, he really thinks Trump can win. I'm like, can? I was like, he's winning as we speak. Like, are y'all not paying attention to like people? Because I think people get isolated and like the academic circles, like, like they start to label who would vote for Trump as this or this, and then it comes to find out, stuff like that happens, and then I'm like, dang, I was telling y'all this the whole time, and I ain't even got my degree yet. I ain't even got like, I'm just
Right.
some
You're just piecing
dude.
together the puzzle.
Yeah, so I think that's something that I really like to discuss with people is just like, because sometimes it's like, oh, like I don't get into politics, but I'll ask them like 3 or 4 questions, and I'm like, do you know you kind of a communist?
You kind of into politics. You got
Uh,
me on that one. Like, I don't think you ever asked me like specific questions because I knew better than to say I wasn't into politics around you. But I feel like just hearing you talk to people about politics in that way, it's like, I guess I kind of am more into politics than I would think on a surface level. And I think that's why I appreciate like storytelling, podcasting, stuff like that, because people really have had just the amount of time that they need to really unpack some of their thoughts or unpack some of their ideas and feelings. Because, yeah, 2 questions in, you're like, yeah, we like maybe you don't think this is political because that's not what the media is putting out. Like, you're not going to be seeing this on the CNN or Fox News headlines, but this is all part of politics and it all plays a role in each other.
Yeah, like just like I said about food, like being a right. Once they decide that, it would fundamentally change everything. Because now, a bunch of, it would make this like tumbleweed of things happening. But even something else as simple as um, like who's your favorite football team or something? Oh, I really
Yeah.
like football. I'm a part of the. I'm like, well, there's a whole group that's against children playing playing football because of the impacts on the brain.
Yeah.
Like now, because now you start to see there's almost a political choice to be made, and I think it's more about like not being perfect or trying to have this perfect politic, but more so like, are you kind of reinforcing what you're learning or what your belief is by things you're reading or things you're keeping up with, or is it something that hasn't been like thought about? Because you know for myself, I think for a lot of things that I had that were like problematic within that I'm still working on, but just recognizing that I haven't even read about this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying stuff at this point. So maybe I need to read a little bit before I just feel like I have such a feeling about it. You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And I appreciate you unpacking that to that extent. Um, there's quite a few things that I wanted to kind of unpack a little bit further that you mentioned within political science. But as the video listeners will see, I had a little sneeze attack and I desperately need to blow my nose real quick. So we're going to take like a little quick 30-second intermission. I'm going to blow my nose and we'll get right back to it.
Crown Ellen, Bay Area, a proud sponsor of the Banquet Hall podcast. Thanks for listening.
So a couple of things that you mentioned that I really want to touch bases on. I think one kind of was alluding to when you were talking about like wanting Black people to have like a united front and just centralizing like all the different like diasporic Black voices. Of course, you use different words, but one of the things that I feel has come up a lot over the course of time knowing you and part of you sharing your story being from Shelby that I think is very important. It's just, well, not even just Shelby, but Shelby, Texas, Florida. You've had a lot of time living in the South and have direct lived experience living in some of those Southern states, as you mentioned, of like, you don't really see portrayed in the present time in the media. And so I feel like you did a lot, both directly and indirectly, to really try to help people destigmatize the South in their mind, especially as it pertains to Black Southerners, because I think especially you bring up the Trump administration and being a poli-sci student, and like as like polls were coming in and oh well, everybody in the South is dumb to think this way, or those types of things that you will be hearing on a day-to-day basis. And for some people, it's just when you like take out the human part of it and it's just the South and lumping up all these different folks in there, you don't realize how much erasure takes place in just saying stuff like that. So I wanted to give you some space to talk a little bit about like what does it mean to you to like destigmatize the South as it relates to Black Southerners and just how much impact some of those words and statements can have.
I would say just because like especially with things that are a part of our culture that got snatched away, like even cowboys. Most cowboys was not white. They were. You think they was gonna be doing that? Like I don't think people know necessarily what cowboys actually did and do, but basically they either like they break horses, they like kind of do the cattle drive. They don't do the cattle drives and stuff like that the same, but there was it was not this thing where like most of them was not going. That's just reality of what the life of a cowboy was, and so then you get into now once you can make money being like breaking horses or doing the bullfighting and bull riding and stuff like that. Now we start the now that's like a white people thing, and then even music. Like I don't think there is a genre that I can't trace back to somebody in the South started. Like when you look at country music, when you look at the blues, when you look at jazz, when you look at rock and roll, I mean R&B is really its own thing. Soul music, like jazz. I already said jazz, but like all of it has some origin. Even for like, so people don't know this, like Nirvana, like on that "Smells Like Teen Spirit," that drum, that little, it took that from like black people drumming in the 70s with like disco music. Like it's these ever present parts of like blackness and like people from the South that like I think gets erased because it gets like it starts to become marketable, and then you can package it out and then make it be from somewhere else. And so that would happen. Like I just watched Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and um that comes out in that because you'll have somebody writing songs, making songs, they'll be stolen by record companies. I mean Elvis, like I'm just saying Elvis, I think people just know what I mean by that. um so when you start to say, well, Elvis is American, all of that stuff, then it should have been a black person. Like that's how I basically look at it. Like there's no way to have an American culture without a Black Southern culture. Like it, I think when it comes to especially food, I would say, that was one of the things that had one of my biggest, like I don't know, contentions is just because like man, I had you in there eating liver mush, bro. Like I don't even people don't even know, but I had Kyler in there eating liver mush and in La Jolla in our apartment, like just different stuff like that. I know, like yeah, historically this or this, like oh that's just the extra parts. I'm like, what do you think wings is?
Yeah.
People love wings though. People love hot dogs. They
Hot dogs
love.
is your go-to example.
I'm just saying, people love hot dogs and stuff. And I'm like, y'all don't think that's the extra parts? Like, I just want to keep the logic.
I
Like,
feel you.
so I think with food, just having fish fries, like things being around food, um, like I just think that's something else that is it starts there and then it moves out. Like it looks different. Like when we go to Flavor Table, yeah, and we got people in LA that's cooking, like people that's like I'm over here like, bro, these are probably some of the best grits I don't have. Period. Like, and I'm from North Carolina, but that's because that origin point is from an older
Yeah.
standpoint. Like, it wasn't from just like even my mom, you know what I'm saying, or even my grandma, like them some like, and people like to think that like we're so detached from slavery, but like I tell people all the time, like my grandma, she just turned, I think she's turning 73. She picked cotton as a little girl in North Carolina, like missing school to go pick cotton, and like that was a tangible part of her experience. And my grandma's really not that old, bro. Like,
Right.
and maybe it wasn't like, you know, under the guise of slavery, but like the processing of cotton is something that's very intensive for somebody that's 6, 7 years old to be doing. So I think like when you think of stuff like that and see how we're not that removed from it, there's no need for me to have no shame about that. There's no shame in the crop. The shame is in the people that was dehumanizing others in order to make that crop profitable. And so then people start to detach from growing things. Like, oh, I'm not gonna be out there in the sun, and people saving. I ain't gonna be out there slaving in the sun, but not realizing how much independence comes from being able to decide your outcome and have control over that, and being able to build something through hard work for real. You know what I'm saying? And like now, you know, a lot of black farms are failing, not necessarily because of their fault, but because of the impacts of capitalism making, you know, this industrial size way of making food that never was the purpose. Like you was never supposed to be able to just get wings in a bag. There's only 2 wings on a chicken.
You mean you're not supposed to be able to get the 32-piece frozen in the freezer out of Target?
Yeah, like I mean, when you look at it, okay, let's say you got a 10-piece wing, 5 chickens, folks, five
Quick,
whole
quick
chickens.
maths.
And technically, if you want to cut the wings, I guess maybe it's 4 wings, but it, I don't count them as real wings. Like I want the wing, not this one wing is the little flat. Like that's how they getting us.
Yeah, who do we talk to about that? Because we eating drumettes. Man,
Yeah, these are drumettes. The wing, we are getting half a wing actually, and they finessing us to do it. Like it's nasty what's happening right now.
talk
And
about it.
I think just how much it enriches your like my life. Like I have a little garden, and just how much I know, even just with a smidgen more space, I could have some chickens, a couple like couple goats or something. Like it would just make your life a lot more easier because yeah, it takes time, but then at the end you're able to be like, dang, like now I'm not paying for meat for the next 2 3 months, and it's just something I'm not gonna buy or something I don't have to think about, or a crop that I brought in and now I can use that to trade something else. Um, but I think a lot of that experience is just like it's lost right now because um folks haven't had as much experience with people that's actually doing it. Even me, I know for myself, I'm even now, like one of the things is that the rural experience is starting, like people ain't knowing how to grow stuff. Like that's not as normal no more. Like so my grandma know how to grow stuff, and so I know how to grow stuff, and my mom do. And she kept doing it. Like my grandma has like this garden, she grows a bunch of vegetables and plants, but like that's not the norm like across like everywhere because of the work that it takes. Like you have to be able to do it, able to teach it. So I think like that's where my passion is making sure that people know different ways that they can feed themselves and not have to depend on like this idea that someone else is gonna always do it for me. Because the like once like yeah, it's gonna be important always to educate people, but I always tell people like it's very hard for me to logically think that people are gonna really internalize what I have to say if they're hungry. So even with all this political stuff I say, or like I might have this ideology, my biggest ideology is everybody eats.
Hey, that's essential.
Because there's been no revolution that's happened where they didn't know how they was feeding people. Those never lasted. And they spun out and it didn't sustain. You always have to find out how are people going to eat. So if I'm wrong for that, I'm wrong for that.
Hey, that's a good thing to be firm on and just stick to your morals. I think you touched on quite a bit as it relates to the South and even kind of spilled over a little bit into Black people in agriculture. One of the things I want to make sure that I specifically highlighted in case you had more you want to talk about on the Run of Show, you put Spotty Dopalicious.
Yeah, so that's a song from Outkast. That's what I named my research project after. So I kind of talked about it a little bit, but basically um I looked at the different representations that I was seeing in media. And then I looked at how that related to the um, closeness economically to a college or to a university. And so when you start to compare the number of universities that's within an hour of Shelby versus the number of universities within an hour of the center of San Diego, that's a large part of this. And then you start to look at, okay, well, how many jails is being built and how many prisons is being built? And you start to see, wow, these places that's prisons probably could have been colleges. And those people that was in there probably could have been in classrooms learning stuff. But that was a choice they decided to make. And I think the more that I did my research through just looking at that, I was able to look and say like, yo, like the more that we highlight and make the South more visible, I would say Moonlight is another movie that really was a good example too, where you're able to show people dealing with the realities, but also living out some freedom too. Because I think a lot of I would say urban centric like bases of like storytelling, one of the things that is I would say like shown a lot is like, oh, there's nowhere to go, I'm trapped. But like out in the country and just out in like, you know, there's always somewhere where you can go and just be in the middle of nowhere and exist. And I think we need more space to exist while also not like, because one of the things that, because like Dr. Charles is my advisor, but one of the things he told me was keeping the real realities and not getting lost in like um the idea of like, oh, a bunch of Black people coming together in terms of like glamorizing it, because at the same time there's a whole lot of like sick stuff to this day, like the street going into Shelby named after the person who wrote Birth of a Nation.
Oh wow.
So
It's also an interesting concept to hear the street going into a city. Like
yeah,
it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around like the street.
yeah. And Dylan Roofs, the one who had shot up the church and stuff, he went to the Burger King that's going to the street, like by my grandma's house.
Wow. Dang. That's really close to home, like figuratively and literally.
Yeah. So like, you know, there when I went to high school, because I was up there for high school for a little bit, it was normal for, you know, there to be like, you know, clan members. Like there was somebody in my class. She wanted to show and tell clan robes that her grandpa had. This is like 20 what 2011 2012, like we are far past this. You think and she was like adamant about them being different colors and um like they're not all white and you know there's different, and I'm sitting in class just like trying to process like I'm in class, I'm in school, right? Like, and the teacher, it wasn't this immediate shutdown from the teacher either. The teacher just was like, nah, we're probably not gonna do that, but let them fully express in class. And so it's reality, but I think that's sometimes what I miss is that
Mm,
there's not as much of the covert. Like I'm used to overt, so I feel like you see the Confederate flag truck and Confederate flag pajama pants set in Walmart. You know what time it is, and it's okay. They on that type of time. I can be on my type of time and go about my day. I think sometimes out here, somebody will feel so just overwhelmingly upset. And I'm just like, man, you might not make it from dog. Like, it seemed like they was getting some chips and leaving. You know, I don't know if we gon' I mean, that's just the reality to it. But it's also knowing like what time people be on. Like, and so
yeah.
you don't have to go up to this person and wonder why they looking at you some type of way. Um, so I think that's something that I miss a little bit is if it's a different it's like they call it, you know, suffocation boa constrictor type of thing. Where is it venom? You feel me? I mean, either way, but I think I'm just more used to that, and I think the covert gets a lot more. It gets out of the realm of like, what are we doing and what are we gonna do about it, and more in this like mental headspace that I don't like. I don't like being in. I don't like being in the headspace of like, because that's kind of like what Secret Invasion is all about.
Hey, no Secret Invasion spoilers for our listeners,
No
though.
spoilers, but I'm just saying, like
Yeah.
from the previews, you can gather that it's secret. They invading still.
Marvel gonna have to pay us for the slight plug for Secret Invasion. But I want to start to transition a little bit because I wanted to give the listeners quite a bit of background on who you are, your upbringing, your experiences, how you see the world, because I feel like the more you understand about just what got you to where you are today, the better you can appreciate some of the things you do, both as yourself and your brand, but also through your music. And so not too long ago, you dropped Catalyst, and you have a lot of other songs as well out there. For some of our listeners, they might know you from your hit single "Be a Shoe Gone Crazy." Uh, but I wanted to give you some space just to talk about like what got you into wanting to create music and who you are as an. I don't want to just label you as a rapper, but as an artist.
I think what got me into music was the fact that I could.
I
I
like
think that's my like I started making music just like it was like on the homie Roberto couch in high school. We just had this regular mic, a little interface, and some headphones. And it was just fun. It was fun. I wasn't getting in trouble. I wasn't into nothing. I was just goofing around, being funny, and just like able to express like just and not even trying to take myself serious. I think that's the thing that I love most about making music is trying my hardest not to make myself the subject of seriousness. Um, because I feel like people take me way too seriously already. So I'd like making music where like I'm saying onomatopoeia on a song. Like I've never
that.
heard the word onomatopoeia on a song or used on a song before. And I was just like, I feel like doing that, so I'm gonna do like I don't know, it wasn't like this big super thought out thing. And I feel like it helps me to organically express my thoughts and stuff that goes through my head, but also it helps express how I could be thinking in a like if I'm walking somewhere, what might be going through my head. It really happens in how I'll be writing music. Like I'll be talking about like reparations or something, and how that's making me upset that we don't have reparations. And then the next line, I'm like, man, we turning up. Like there's so much that I like to add into there, but it also shows my interest because I'll rap about like cartoon characters
Mm-hmm.
who's like, you know, like I'll be watching The Office. So it's stuff that's like me. Like, and I think with music, I also am comfortable with it not being this thing that like I'm trying to like I don't know. I feel like for me, I just want people to hear it. Like I don't even I know there's no money in streams. People be thinking, I don't know. People be like, I'd be surprised, but I think it's because there's not a lot of education on it. But people be you know, I wouldn't even call them fans, but I would say people that like genuinely like my music. They're like, oh, like how much do you get off your music? And I'm like, get. It's expensive to put these songs together and do all of this and the streams and stuff. Like, I mean, that's not nobody, not even the biggest people. That's marginal what they making off of their music. So, um, but I'm comfortable with not having that be like an integral part of like my experience making music because I feel like there's enough people doing that. Like, I feel like there's enough people that yeah, I'm getting money. I got the new Wraith. That's cool. Like, I think there's a lot of people speaking to that and they can speak on those activities. I be knowing where I belong. I don't belong in conversations about I bought 5 or 6 houses last month. That's not
you.
it's not me. And that's all right. Like that's someone else's story. And um I think like I want to always like have a chance to like educate a little bit. And have it not be this thing where I'm trying to say I know it all or I know everything, but it's just like I'm sharing what I'm observing and what I've learned. And that's what I really like about making music is like merging together, being goofy, being funny, but also like really sharing what I be thinking about. Like I really be thinking about the crime bill of 1994 that started a lot of like 3 strikes laws and started a lot of like stuff. And I'm like, dang, if that just didn't happen,
yeah,
like I would say for a vast majority of people that I know that have like family and loved ones that have been like, you know, formerly incarcerated and stuff, they just would have been at home. And that's just wild to think because you know, but things like that is what goes through my mind. So I like to put that on songs. So I don't be hearing that on songs. I don't be hearing people rap about um like how much knowledge was taken from African and Black people over time and repackaged for a capitalist purpose. Like I don't be hearing that on a lot of songs. So I was like, I'm not gonna complain about music today because that's what people be doing. Oh, I don't like these songs. They don't be rapping about nothing. I'm like, they rapping about something you just don't care about it.
Yeah.
Make your songs.
Yeah.
Where's your songs at? And I'm under the like understanding that like, you know, it's not like music isn't for everybody, but I think that's why I like doing it. Like it's not for everybody, but I enjoy it, so that's enough. We shouldn't always have to have a capitalistic association to expression, like to where you're oh, you gotta start painting to make money. Like, if you just like painting, just start painting, man. That's how most of the greatest painters in art history, they was just some guy.
hey, that's my brand, just some guy. But no, I think that's very important for our listeners to hear, just because I feel like I know a lot of people who no one will ever see their art just because they think they need to do something that's going to make money. And that is so often like such a barrier for people. And I think just hearing somebody who has put some of their craft out there talk about how you're in it for the love of the game, like you're just making music because you want to make music. I think that's really impactful because I know so many dope people who are like, oh, but it's not going to get the streams or it's not going to get the listens or it's not going to get the views or the likes. And it's like, well, do you want it to do it for that or do you want to do it because you want to do it? And if you do want to do it to monetize and like get the likes and stuff, like that's all cool. But just make sure that you know what your why is. And I think that just hearing you tell that, I think it's going to be very inspiring for a lot of our listeners, just because it's real. It takes a lot to get to where you're making money off of artists. I mean, I even get people like, oh, like, how much you make off the podcast. I'm like, you not even listening to the podcast.
Like they be like make like because it's I think in a different time, um, there used to be this association to like, oh, you did a lot of hard work, so you should get rewarded.
Hard
And
work
if I
don't mean
was able
shit,
to
right?
have like even if like because what I think something like 350 people have streamed my album once over, right? If they would have had to buy that and they would have had to buy 350 CDs for the price of like maybe $15, yo, yo, we might, you know what I'm saying? In those small terms, like yeah, they have those record labels that eat all the money in between.
Yeah.
I think it was more of a thing where somebody could say like, "Oh, I actually have people that really like, you know," and I think that's what things are transitioning to because now I think once there's more labor unions and stuff like that, that's where things will start to change with music, where it's not just this fast food consumption of it. Whereas my music, I feel like you kind of gotta listen to it a couple times, like just to maybe you might hear something for the first time again. And I like that about my music. So.
Yeah, and I like it about it too. And I always enjoy playing your songs or Jeff's songs or Nilla songs in the car, and people are like, oh, like what's that? Like that's hot. It's like, oh, you don't know nothing about oh yeah, huh? You ain't heard this one. Something new for you.
Yeah.
But where can people find your music now that they've heard a little bit about your story and about why you created? If somebody did want to listen to your music, where would they find it?
I'm on Spotify. If um, you got Apple Music, you got Tidal. Um, what else is there? I think it might even be on Amazon Music. But just Andre 1K. That's the artist name, and then um, Catalyst was the first thing I came out with, and then it was Throwing Bombs. So I got a few singles in there too. I'm about to come out with some more music too. Um, it's been such a long journey. These I'm sitting on some heat though. I just want to like just so it's said, I'm sitting on some heat. I think when I made music before, I just kind of was like, oh, I'm trying to do this or this, but I think I want to be more deliberate, so I'm trying
Mm,
to. Um, but yeah, more music on the way.
more music on the way. Have you ever experimented with putting your music out there on Bandcamp, which is something I learned about literally like a week ago?
I know what it is, but I haven't thought about putting it on there.
Yeah, because the only reason I know about it is because Nilla, who was our last guest on the podcast, she had me I put the link for her Bandcamp in the bio, so where you can buy like her singles or her albums, and it goes directly to support her. Because I thought about it when you said like, oh, if those 350 people gave you that $15 for the album, just how much of a difference that would make. So I'm gonna speak it into existence that not too long after this episode is out, y'all start be able to buy Andre's music directly from him on Bandcamp and just to put some money in his pockets. Like you ain't got to become a
Yeah, and the
millionaire off your
producers
music.
too. Like, cause it's a lot of people, man. I don't think people will be like to make a song now. For even for you to even hear it correctly, that's money, yo. Like,
There's a lot going into it.
so if I'm able to like, get a producer some and stuff, like that'd be cool. Like, and then that would be cool. So I'm gonna look into that. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, I mean that's we started this. Well, I started, but we was talking about earlier in the podcast about the priority being everybody eating. That's what the banquet hall is kind of designed to be about too. Like this is the podcast for everybody. We just trying to get a meal, dog. We trying to get the appetizer out. We trying to slice us some chicken or
Sides,
some
couple
sides,
sides,
some
you know?
sweet tea.
Yeah, that too, maybe a couple biscuits.
All that. But kind of rounding the corner to the tail end of the podcast, I have some like quicker questions to ask, and just whatever comes to mind is totally fine. First things first, who are some people who inspire you?
People who inspire me, definitely my loved ones. My my family inspires me. Um, my partner inspires me. Like she, man. even this morning, like she just how she explains her dreams, how she talks about all that she wants to accomplish in the world. She inspires me so much. My dog inspires me. Rico, he's uh he's such a good boy.
Maybe hear you.
And I don't know, I feel like he helps remind me to like, take life like one day at a time. I would say, um, like you definitely inspire me. Like I feel like my inspiration comes more from those that I meet and interact with more frequently than the folks that I might never even see. But and then those people for me are more so historical figures. Like I'm really inspired by like Kwame Ture and Malcolm X and Fannie Lou Hamer. Um, like Zora Neale Hurston. Like those are all huge inspirations to me. Like, um, and I think I also get really inspired by like I already talked about my family, but my nieces and nephews, like super inspired by them because um man, they the future for real. Like for real. Like they really the future. So just the things that they understand already, that being so young, man, like you keeping me on my toes. Like y'all keeping me like, what I'm saying? So I'm really inspired by that. And um yeah, I would say those are my inspirations. I would say like I have inspirations like artistically and stuff too. Definitely Outcast. I would say Lady Mob, Zero. I would say PD Pablo, um, Gucci Mane. Like there's a whole bunch of people that like I can tell were a part of my culture because they was getting bumped in the trunk. Like that was what was playing all throughout I was at, all the different places I lived in the South. It was somebody I knew the song that was somebody trunk was rattling. I was like, all right, I know that song. Like 3 6 Mafia, like I already know what the song is from how the trunk rattling. And I missed that about home. Like I really missed that because I mean you can't. It's just hard to measure, but those are a lot of my inspirations. I'm inspired by uh, I'm inspired by a lot of people, but I think it comes back to like the people that I actually like see and like talk to and um, kind of bounce energy and ideas off of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I buried the lead a little bit, but you just mentioned like the trunk rattling. So I want to just give you a quick second. What was it like when I got a box in the trunk of my little gray Mustang driving around UC San Diego's
I
campus?
felt like I was at home. I felt like that was home. My my uh my cousin, he had a Tahoe with 215s in the back, and we just be riding around. Can't even like I don't know. We know it's obnoxious. The OL.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody else with a box on campus.
No, no, not like that. Like so, I think it brought a level of like because I think one of the things that I really like Troy. I didn't get to bring up Troy, but Troy really inspires me too.
Troy that
Uh,
worked at the BRC.
Yeah, he just like now some years now, but did the PhD program at in Wisconsin and stuff. But like one of the things that I always took away from him was just like how he didn't ever feel the need to like code switch, and he went on and did the PhD thing too. And like that's one of the biggest inspirations to me because I always be feeling like, dang, I gotta like tone this down when I walk in the stream with Troy. Troy came professional though. Like it wasn't like I think some people conflate that like I guess oh, you just do what you do, and but the true part of like code switching is not like being able to speak plainly. I think he always kept that going. That was a big inspiration too.
Yeah, in Troy's country. So ain't no doubt about that. And I think that that person for me was probably like people like Dante and Achille, where they're like, oh, these are dudes like from the city of Los Angeles, and nobody's going to take any part of their blackness away at any point in anything that they're saying, anything that they're doing, and they're getting business done, and all that. Like I think that just kind of goes back to kind of one of our first topics about the importance of those healthy black male friendships and relationships, because there's so many different people that we encounter throughout our time at UCSD that's like giving permission or affirming the permission to just live truly and authentically in yourself.
Yeah, because I didn't even speak on them, but like that was a influence of why I went to poli sci too, because they was poli sci majors, and like we was in the lab though, like we was like people think you, I don't know what people think, but we was working, like we'd be in the library, the little like they had us in this like side library thing where it was just us in there. We wasn't all around the library and stuff, but we was working like yo, doing it like you take this class, you can get it like this how you get the A in this class, you gotta do this and this. Like they was putting me on to that, putting me on the jobs, putting me on to like research opportunities and stuff like that. And moving through practice, but then once that was over, they was themselves and worked as hard as they played. So I feel like that was something that I definitely took away that people would sometimes get lost in like, oh, I gotta try so hard, but then never ever turn up or never do nothing fun. And from them, I was like, nah, they able to. It's balanced because they doing both. Like you got to be able to do both to really make it. And I think that's something I try to always remember even today. Like you can't try to work so hard and never like go out and enjoy nothing, even in your whatever version that might look. It might not be like turning up, but it might. But whatever that is, like really making that happen.
Love that. Another thing that I wanted to ask, and obviously I know the answer to this, but I gotta do the podcast thing and let the listeners know the answer to this. Why 1K? Where did 1K come from?
Yeah, so I when I lived in Texas, one of my homies, his name was Keegan. He he always was like we was always like making fun and like joking with each other. But he was like, you could be like Andre 3000, but you're one third of his height. And then from there, I was just like, I mean, I could like I feel like I just doubled down on it. I had a MySpace, so I made a little edit on MySpace. Had the like lettering and stuff on there on the MySpace picture, and it came out hard. And I was like, yo. And then it was like one of my pictures on MySpace that had like a bunch of comments and stuff. And then I was just like, I mean, I'm gonna just rock with it. And then from there, I just kept rocking with it, and people just started calling me 1K. It just stuck. Like, and I always tell people they like, "Oh, you can't make up your own nickname." I'm like, I did.
You did, and it stuck. Like everybody knows you Andre 1K,
Yeah.
which is a good segue. Where can people find you on socials?
I'm not on socials as much. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, but if there is like a place, it'll probably like you can find me on Instagram, Andre underscore 1K, and I think a link tree's on there. I'm pretty sure it has everything else. And same, it's everywhere the same, honestly. Like, I had it from the beginning, man. Like from the beginning, like I had that. So it might seem simple, but it's Andre underscore 1K basically everywhere.
got to keep the uniform branding intact.
Yeah.
Um, what are some? Let's see. You talked about some music on the docket. You got some heat you sitting on. Any other shameless plugs or manifestations? Anything you want to let the listeners of the banquet hall know as an exclusive of what you got coming around the corner?
I would say it sounds like Rico barking. Um, I would say something that I have on the docket is furthering, I want to just manifest like peace and
Mm.
further growth and um, health for everybody out in the world. I think that's just what I want to manifest. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Like, um, but yeah, just peace and prosperity for everybody listening.
And then going into takeaways, what do you hope our listeners take away from this episode? And as a second part to that, what did you take away from this episode?
So, what I hope people take away from this episode is like we as Black folks have a lot in common, and we also have a lot of differences. And the more that we honor the breadth of our diversity as a group, I feel like we'll make enough space to where we don't have to um, kind of live where we're like in comparison or anything like that, but we able to do it within ourselves. And um, that's what I want people to take away. And I think my main takeaway from this is like, dang, it's been a lot of stuff. I think that was my first that was my first thought. It's just like seeing how old I am, how much I've experienced, and being able to really like sit with like this is a positive part of my life, and also that like the more that we are able to stay in a space of learning and of like reading and of scholarship, no matter how that looks, because you don't gotta go get no degree to open up a book. It just isn't a part of and a lot of the greatest minds, they weren't stepping foot on a college campus unless they was getting paid. Shout out to Malcolm X. I think Malcolm X stopped school when he was 12. For everybody that didn't know that, um, I'm sure he ended up going back at some points. But I'm saying in terms of like that's what he was working with, and then he read books.
Yeah.
So I just want people to not always associate like knowledge with um, those means of measure that align with capitalism, because knowledge can come from a lot of different forms of fashion that have nothing to do with the degree program, but also there's value in both.
I appreciate that. And one thing I want to start doing for at least as a podcaster, when people mention like reading as a form of knowledge, I always want to ask for some type of book recommendation or something that you feel like listeners should pick up and read a bit on, or even watch a YouTube summary on, like just any piece of literature that you'll recommend for people listening.
Um, listen.
Besides Obsidian by the Fourth Kyler's poetry, shameless.
Besides all of the whole Kyler Nathan universe of books,
The
I'll say
KCU.
I would say Asada definitely. I feel like for a person that might be new into like, oh, like I have some critiques of the police, but I'm not sure how I actually feel about these inner plans. I feel like once you read that, I feel like you answer a lot of questions. That book's answers a lot of questions. And then the next book I would say is Negroes with Guns by Robert F. Williams. Um, I would probably need a whole 6 hour block to talk about gun rights and black people. I just that can of worms is a large can. I don't know if I got the can opener for that, but what I do think is that it showed a realistic standpoint of what it's gonna take. like, like not in no like I think sometimes people get into this world where they go too far, but I think more than anything, that book shows how much again intergenerationally protecting your people and protecting yourself is paramount to being a black person. So um, the third one I would say, trying to think off the top of my head, I would probably say there's a book. It's called The Dictator's Handbook, and it talks about power and abuses of power and how that interplays in different societies and countries and over time. Um, I think those three books really help to like piece together um a lot of like my foundation. So I would recommend those three for sure.
Thank you for the book recommendations as well as for your time sharing your story with the listeners of the Banquet Hall podcast. Before we close out, just want to turn the mic over to you to see if there's anything else on your heart, on your mind that you want to share with our listeners as we close out.
Um, I would say find your favorite food and learn how to cook it.
Mm.
I love popcorn, and I learned how to make popcorn myself, like without the like popcorn bag without the microwave. It's fundamentally changed my life. I can't even when I go to the theaters now, I'm all bougie. I'm like, it's popcorn. Popcorn ain't really hitting like that, but I think everybody deserves to have that, like for themselves, to be able to be like, nah, my favorite food, I know how to make it and make it well. So that's something I think everybody should just, leave here with.
Yeah, food for thought, if you will.
I'm the corny.
You are the corny one, but I've learned the art of the corny from you. But just want to thank you once again, thanking the listeners as well for tuning in for this episode of the Banquet Hall podcast. Find us on all socials. We are officially on Threads, and the graphics even updated to have the Threads logo on the video overlay. But Threads, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you put in Banquet Hall Pod, you'll probably find us. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, make sure you hit that 5-star rating. YouTube, make sure you subscribe, follow wherever you listen to. Please, please, please tell somebody else to listen to this. Shout out to all of Andre's family who's I know tuning into this. Especially like I don't know, Andre got the like strongest genes in the world because it's gonna be 17 people that look the same listening to this podcast. Like y'all all got that Thompson look, and I rock with it. You have a real like y'all are visibly a family. Like it's like nah, they related.
Yeah, for sure. Even my nieces and nephews, I'm like, dang, like you look the same.
But thank you all for tuning in. Leave us a comment, let you know what you think of Andre's story. Make sure you go stream his music, and we'll catch y'all on a future episode of the Banquet Hall.